Welcome to the NBA Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyden. Talking about tonight's four-game Martin Luther King slate starts at 8. Kicks off with obviously the rematch of Golden State and Cleveland. Things definitely shifted from that first game because Curry didn't play.
Yeah, it kind of changes things around a little bit if you're just kind of looking overall. First of all, obviously, I hope everyone enjoys a full day of basketball. There's literally basketball games from about an hour and a half from the time of this recording all the way until tonight. So it's gonna be fun, and it's gonna be fun to watch this Golden State Cleveland game as we kick the slate off.
And you just brought up a stat to me about the previous two meetings, and I got a kick out of it because it's pretty absurd.
Yeah, according to ESPN, the Warriors and the Cavs have played on the last two MLK days, and the Cavaliers have lost those games by a combined 69 points. So they've been getting blown out on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and they've been getting blown out by the Warriors. So a little bit interesting, especially given how bad Cleveland has been of late.
I mean, how bad could it get tonight? Like, could we potentially see like a 15, 20 point blowout?
We could. I mean, like I said, the Cavaliers have been just downright terrible recently. So, I mean, who knows? We could definitely see a huge blowout.
Let's talk about that game here first. Golden State, mentioned that Curry didn't play on that Christmas Day game. He's back tonight. We've seen Cleveland, obviously really struggle against point guards kind of again of late. Couple obviously a top tier. We have Chris Paul, we have Westbrook. It's kind of a top heavy point guard slate here tonight.
Yeah, Cleveland's pretty much struggled against everybody of late. If you just look at their defensive efficiency numbers against every position, center 26th, power forward 27th, small forward 15th, shooting guard 23rd, point guard 22nd. Those are accurate as of yesterday afternoon. But yeah, they've really struggled against everybody, and I absolutely love all the Warriors in this spot. Starting with Steph Curry, I think this is an excellent spot for him. He's just been insane since returning from that injury several games back. Obviously, took a couple games off again, but over his last five, he's shooting almost 53% from the floor, 45% from three. He's averaged 32.4 points per game over those last five. Definitely a great spot for him. If you want to roll him out there, go for it. I think there's a couple better options that we'll get to later on in the slate. So yeah, he's definitely interesting. And I think Klay Thompson's one of my favorite plays from this game. Obviously, probably wanting to get exposure somewhere, and getting exposure with one of the cheaper options is a good idea. And it's a matchup you would expect him to just be outstanding in. Obviously, Christmas Day game, played 35 minutes, had 37 fantasy points. Good spot for him. So I think he's my favorite option out of the Golden State backcourt.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind him. Like you said, he's the cheaper option. That's kind of how I'm attacking this Golden State side tonight, going with, Thompson and Green, I think is my primary options, and then sprinkling in some Curry and Durant. And Durant's interesting, I think, tonight because there's such a significant price difference from him and LeBron on DraftKings, especially. You got LeBron at 11-1, Durant's 9-8, a decent bargain on Durant here. Obviously put up 51 points last time these two met. That was without Curry, but I mean, I think 45, 50 fantasy points is certainly his range of outcomes, and obviously he does have a higher ceiling as well. $700 cheaper on FanDuel. Like, I don't mind kind of going Durant over LeBron tonight.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this game is pretty much tied with the highest scoring game on the slate, along with the Houston and Clippers game. So getting exposure to pretty much everyone is a good idea. You mentioned Durant's price. He's down to 9,800 on DraftKings. He is 10-7 on FanDuel. I like the price on him. Like, I think you're looking at probably 45, 50 fantasy points out of him tonight. And at that price on the slate, I mean, I'll definitely take that. I think Draymond Green is my preferred option here, though. I wrote him up in the GPP article. It's just, I mean, the dude's doing everything for this team. His assist numbers are solid. I have the specific statistic in the GPP article, but he's got like double digit assists or rebounds and like four of his last five games, a couple triple doubles over his last 10, had a triple double against this Cavaliers team last time out. Obviously that was without Steph, but given the struggles that Cleveland has defending the position and the role that he has in this offense and in this defense, like, I think he's just I think he's the best play from the Warriors side for cash and GPPs.
Yeah, and I don't worry about dropping the assist. I still think 7, 8 assists is certainly viable for him tonight. And this Cleveland team just usually they've been a really great rebounding team in the past. This year, I mean, they're ranked 23rd. Like I don't really worry about the lack of peripheral stats for Draymond, and I just think the price is fitting. Like you said, he's such a good way to attack this game.
Yeah, and I mean, like he's gonna play. He's gonna be out on the floor guarding Kevin Love some of the time. Some of the time, he's gonna be, being guarded by Jay Crowder. And if he's not giving you the assist, he's probably going to be giving you the rebounds, the blocks, and the steals. So just because of how consistent he is with every statistical category, I think he has a really solid floor and pretty darn high upside. I know he's a little more expensive on FanDuel, but I mean, the blocks and the steals upside kind of makes up for that as opposed to DraftKings. So I think he's a great option here, and I would not be shocked to see him put up 48, 50 fantasy points tonight.
Certainly, and with everyone healthy, it kind of takes some of these bench players out of play.
I don't mind Iguodala, who does tend to play a decent amount of minutes against this team, against the Cavaliers. So he's interesting if you're needing a guy a little bit cheaper. He's 4,100 on DraftKings. He's 3,700 on FanDuel. Assuming he is able to go, I think all these guys are listed as probable, but we'll just have to monitor the news on that. But he'd be the guy that I'd be looking at if you're wanting, a really really cheap option from this game.
And on the Cavs side, we saw Kevin Love, blow up against his team Christmas Day. It's been a while. We saw finally a big game out of Kevin Love against Indiana, and also played 36 minutes. A bit encouraging given his recent trend of minutes.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how his minutes will shake out. You mentioned 36 minutes against Indiana, against his team last time out. 36 minutes or 35 minutes as well. Just went bananas with 31 points, 18 rebounds. I do like him in GPPs. I don't know that I'm going to be looking his way on FanDuel because he's center eligible only, and I think there's some decent options there from this late slate to target. But like, if you want to roll him out there, that's fine. He's GPPs. He's always going to be GPPs only for me, given the minutes fluctuation. So that's one way you can go. Obviously, if you want to use LeBron James, you would expect him to bounce back from that terrible outing on Christmas Day. So he's fine as well. He's not my favorite top tier option tonight, but he's another option that you can consider.
Yep, certainly. And, I don't mind rolling out Dwayne Wade in some GPPs. He's fairly cheap. Had a great game against them on Christmas Day. I mean, he's been fairly solid. We've seen some upside, couple 30 fantasy point games out of him over his last 10. Going to play kind of right around 24 minutes or so. Like at his price, I don't mind going that way.
Yeah, I would expect the return of Isaiah Thomas and potential minutes increase for him to start eating into some of that Dwayne Wade production. But if you want to take a shot on him in GPPs, that's fine. Thomas is a little bit interesting on DraftKings and FanDuel. He's 5,500, I believe, on both sites. His minutes are climbing a little bit. He played 25 last time out. He's been downright terrible the last two games. I mean, and GPPs, I think you can take a shot there. Hope he gets close to 28 minutes. This is a matchup that he's really excited for. So there is kind of that narrative, like he's talked about wanting to be a part of this rivalry before. So there's a little bit of narrative there. Price is fair. Like I said, GPPs, if you want to roll that out there, go for it.
Yeah, I don't mind going that way. That was kind of really it for me on the Cleveland side.
You could probably take a shot on Jay Crowder. There's not a ton of value as of this recording, at least for this slate. He's 3,800 on DraftKings. He's small forward, power forward eligible there. He's 3,900 on FanDuel. You could take a shot there if you need a value option.
Sacramento OKC, next one here. Obviously, OKC the far superior team, but this one was very close the last game.
Yeah, it was. And I believe the Kings ended up upsetting Oklahoma City in that game. I try to wipe every Oklahoma City loss from my memory, so I don't remember the outcome of that game. At least I'm claiming to not remember the outcome of that game. But yeah, it's a little bit of an interesting game to target here. I prefer pretty much everyone from the Oklahoma City side over people from the Kings side of things. It is going to be a possible friends and family game for Buddy Hield. He went to the University of Oklahoma. I haven't seen anything saying that he's going to have a bunch of friends and family in attendance. I haven't been able to be on TweetDeck this morning because it was down for a couple hours, which was tilting. But yeah, so if you want to go with Buddy Hield, that's fine. I don't know that I have a ton of interest in the Kings side of this game, though.
No, I don't either. And I mean, he'll play well against them last time out, put up 36 fantasy points. He's only 4,500. He's also small forward, shooting guard eligible on DraftKings. I don't mind taking a shot. I think kind of both him and De'Aaron Fox are interesting GPP targets on this slate. I think obviously it's not the greatest matchup of the world, but I mean, over the last 10 games, OKC 14th in defensive efficiency against point guards. So it's kind of in middle of the road. And he's dropped down in price. Like he was high fives, just a few games ago. Now he's only 4.9. So GPPs, I'll take a shot. Cause like you said, like there's not a ton of standout value.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can take a shot on Fox. I think you can take a shot on Hill. Again, Buddy Hield, you can take a shot on if you really, really wanted to. Zach Randolph's the interesting option here. Minutes are going to be kind of up and down as this team kind of battles through a bunch of really tough losses and they start maybe to transition towards some of the younger guys. They did recall Papagiannis and a couple other players from their G League before hitting the road here to Oklahoma City. But the Thunder have struggled against power forwards of late. So there's a spot that you can attack if you really, really wanted to get some exposure. He's much, much cheaper on FanDuel. Like I think at 4,900 on FanDuel, I would consider him almost cash viable.
Probably the only guy that I'm not going to be really taking a shot on. It's just kind of because of the price is Willie Cauley-Stein in this spot. Tough matchup for him. I kind of see myself just kind of going in some other directions, especially on the other side with Steven Adams and even Derek Favors, who's right there in price.
Yeah, I'd consider him GPPs only. He's been on a pretty solid tear recently. I know he's coming off a bad game, and he lost power forward eligibility on DraftKings, which is tilting. I should say he's coming off a good game against Clippers, had a couple bad games prior to that one, but he's a guy you could attack in GPPs. And other than that, I guess if you wanted to, Scal Labissiere has played over 20 minutes in 4 straight games. Just another cheap option to consider tonight on the slate without a bunch of apparent value at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we saw some upside at him last game, only 3,900. You're going stars and scrubs. It's not the worst play.
Yeah, for sure.
So, on the OKC side, we saw these guys kind of struggle last time out against Sacramento, at their prices. You kind of were looking for a little bit more. Obviously, great options here, great spots for them tonight. But weirdly, they're not priorities for me.
Yeah, they're outside of like Steven Adams. No one from this team is really that great of a play, at least in my eyes. Obviously, we know the Kings are a pretty bad team. Over the last 2 losses, they've given up 247 points. So what is that, like 123.5 points per game over the last 2 losses? So you would expect Oklahoma City to be able to put up some points. And again, I think that starts with Steven Adams. I wrote him up in the GPP article again. I think people are probably tired of me writing up Steven Adams, but like the dude's just been so solid this season. Price over 6K is a little tough to pay off, but I mean, coming off a huge game against the Hornets, against the same Kings team last time out, 29 minutes, 14 points, 6 rebounds. You would expect the rebounding to climb here against a Kings team that really struggles to rebound. So I do absolutely love him, and people want to play Westbrook, go for it. Like, I mean, if you're looking in cash games, he's probably one of the better options to target. So I definitely wouldn't say no to using him. I think in GPPs, of course, as always, fading these high dollar guys is a solid strategy. The rest of the team, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, GPP only for me.
Yeah, that's about it. I mean, they are fairly cheap price. I think Melo and George are a little bit interesting because of their price tags. I think those would be the guys that I'd probably take a little bit more shots on just because Westbrook is so expensive tonight. I'm in complete agreement, as always, with Steven Adams. He's just been one of our favorite plays to kind of lock and load here, especially in this matchup. And, Kings, I mean, third most fantasy points allowed to centers this year, 30th in defensive efficiency. You mentioned the rebounding, and he has that blocks and steals upside. We've seen it over the last few games, especially that game against Charlotte. I mean, 4 blocks, 3 steals, and I think last game he had 5 steals against Sacramento. So like a little bit more on DK, just because he's a little bit cheaper, but obviously FanDuel, I think with kind of a lack of options too, he's clearly a solid play there as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I put some statistics in the GPP article talking about, the Kings, how they struggle to defend post-ups and defending in the paint. And those are some areas where Adams is extremely solid this season. So definitely make sure to check that out if you're interested in Adams today.
Indiana, Utah here next. I think this is obviously a game that people won't be as excited about in comparison to some of the others, but this is kind of where the mid-range and value stands out to me.
Yeah, there's a few different ways you can attack this game. I have to say, I feel really sorry for the Utah Jazz. They just have to be the most snake-bitten franchise in the NBA when it comes to injuries. Thabo Sefolosha now out for the rest of the season, I guess weighing surgical options. It's just, I just feel so bad for this team. It couldn't happen to a better organization. I think they've been one of the better, they haven't had a bunch of talent over the past few years, but I think they've been one of the better organizations as far as how they've operated, and see these injuries continue to happen. It's just kind of sad.
I completely, they're one of those teams that I always kind of tend to root for if they're on, or if they get sneak into the playoffs. I kind of tend to pull for their way a little bit because, like you said, one, they just do things the right way. They have a lot of likable guys on their team as well. And they're just kind of a gritty, good fundamental team.
Yeah, everyone. I do like pretty much everyone on their team except for Rodney Hood.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's, when Hood lights half your DFS money on fire over the last year, I can understand.
Yeah, I mean, the dude just literally craps the bed pretty much any good opportunity he gets. So I can't really root for him. But the rest of the team, like Gobert and some of these other guys, I really do root for them.
Yeah. Let's start with the Indiana side here. Big injury, obviously, is Miles Turner still out. We've seen Sabonis kind of, obviously hasn't been crushing since coming in. Had a tough game against Phoenix, only played 24 minutes, did well against Cleveland. I don't mind him here tonight. We've seen Utah, kind of struggle on the defensive side, especially against bigs.
Yeah, I think it's a better cash game option given his price and his recent production. I don't know that I'd really want to go there in GPPs. I just don't see a bunch of upside at that price, and there's better options to consider if you're looking in that same price range. So definitely think he's cash game viable. Outside of him, I have some concerns. I have a feeling, and I don't like trying to predict these types of games happening, but I have a feeling either Indiana is going to come out and just destroy Utah and blow them out, or Indiana is going to come in, be tired, and get blown out by Utah. I think there's a good chance that there's a blowout on one side of this game. So makes it a little tough to consider paying up for some of these guys, but Victor Oladipo, obviously a solid option if you want to attack Utah here. They do struggle against spot up shooters, so he'd be the other guy that I really consider targeting from the Indiana side of things.
Yeah, his prices dropped down a little bit. Yeah, I don't mind him. I don't mind taking a shot on Darren Collison. He's still fairly cheap. He's coming off a solid game, or a couple solid games here. He played well against Phoenix, played well against Cleveland. Look at Utah being middle of the road against point guards this year. If Collison's playing well, we'll see the minutes kind of start to tick up for him. It was a blowout in that Phoenix game, but he shot really well. 14-11 field goal attempts over his last 2 games. Like you said, I mean, really the 3-point line's been awful for Utah in terms of defending. I think these shooters can obviously have a decent day.
Yeah, I always hate hopping on the Darren Collison train after a stretch of solid outings. I feel like he's going to disappoint, but I did hop on against Milwaukee. I was on him against Miami and Cleveland, and the last 4 games, 3 of the last 4 have been solid considering his price. 5,500 on DraftKings is solid. What is he on FanDuel? 53. I do like that price on FanDuel, especially given there's not a ton of great point guard options on the late slate outside of the studs that you're really considering. So yeah, I mean, I could see him being cash game viable. I don't know that I'd go there in GPPs, but as a guy with a decent floor, I think you can use him in cash games.
It's kind of it for Indiana. Like I have a little bit more interest in the Utah side. Thaddeus Young, his mints have kind of been all over the place. Uh, I don't hate it, but I don't love it either.
Yeah, I think I'd prefer going with Lance Stevenson, just a guy that you would expect to come off the bench. Again, I wrote him up yesterday in the cheat sheets as a guy who just chucks a ton of shots when he sees the floor. He can pull down, double digit boards pretty much any kind of matchup. So he's a guy that I would consider at 5,100 on DraftKings. He's got that multi position eligibility. FanDuel is 5,100 as well. If you're fading the two top tier small forwards on the slate, really not a whole lot of options beyond those two guys. So I don't mind going there.
And on the Utah side, for me, it's Derek Favors tonight. Really like his price. Love the matchup, obviously, against Indiana. He's going to be a guy that I'm probably getting a ton of exposure through.
Yeah, depending on how your lineup construction shakes out, and depending on what happens with the DeAndre Jordan news, which we'll get to a little bit later on, he's probably going to be the most popular power forward play on the slate, and I really don't mind. I don't mind paying that price for him. It's really fair given the matchup. You'd expect him to come out and put up a solid outing, and given the fact that Indiana can't really go big, you won't necessarily see Favors play limited minutes because of matchup. So I do like him here a significant amount. And I know Thabo Sefolosha doesn't eat up a ton of usage, or pull down a bunch of rebounds, but you would expect maybe a couple extra shots and rebound opportunities going Favors' way with Sefolosha out.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Sefolosha's out. I don't know if we see kind of a clear-cut guy who's going to be filling in. I think it's going to be a bunch of kind of guys that chip in, and that kind of hurts obviously for DFS.
Yeah, I think you probably see Joe Johnson pick up extra minutes. We saw 26 against Charlotte. Minutes have been fairly in the mid 20s over the past few games. So I don't think he picks up a ton of extra run here. Joe Johnson's like 80 years old as well, so giving him more than 30 minutes probably not a good idea. He's a decent value option tonight to consider. Royce O'Neal is the interesting name to consider. Played 19 minutes against Charlotte, 14 against Washington, put up 11 and 10 and 19 minutes against Charlotte. If he gets extra run tonight, I think he's the guy to consider at 3,100.
Yep. Donovan Mitchell kind of smashed in between a couple of other options, but I don't mind him tonight. Once again, he's had a pretty stable floor. He's averaging 37 fantasy points over his last 4 games. Obviously, coming off a big game against Charlotte, put up 35 real points. The price just seems to be too low on him. Like 7,100 for this guy's usage in minutes is fairly low.
Yeah, I mean, over 20 or at least 20 field goal attempts in 3 straight games. I do have a little bit of concern. Obviously, I don't like to overweight individual matchups on large slates, but it is something that you do have to take into consideration on small slates like this. And he is going to be matched up with Victor Oladipo for a majority of the game, I would imagine, assuming it stays close. And that does concern me a little bit, especially given how much he's turning the ball over recently. He's had 5 turnovers last game against Charlotte. That's a decent amount of points coming off the board on FanDuel. I think you can use them in GPPs. I think in cash games, you're probably looking elsewhere.
Ricky Rubio, any interest here? He's been very volatile in minutes. Production has kind of been all over the place, but he is a cheap option.
Tournament, sure. I don't necessarily like the matchup for him. It is interesting to note. Again, this was prior to yesterday's games being completed, but Indiana second in defensive efficiency against point guards last 10 games. They've been playing a little bit better recently. Again, some of that could come from them being blown out and them blowing people out. I don't tournaments only. Like there's just yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's this range of Rubio, Collison, Fox. Like it's not the most easy crowd to just jump into your lineups with. I mean, it's kind of everyone has a red flag.
Yeah, for the most part, and there's one thing that I can't get out of my head when it comes to Ricky Rubio is I saw this tweet late last week, and I think it was from Tony Jones. He's a Jazz beat writer, I think that's his name. Talked about how he's seen Rubio just not really love the game of basketball since he's been in Utah, and that really does concern me when I'm considering that. And like, it probably shouldn't, like, that probably shouldn't weigh into my decision making when it comes to using these guys, but it does, and I can't get that out of my head when it comes to Ricky Rubio. So I will not be playing him, but if you want to take a shot on him in tournaments, go for it.
Houston and LA, the last game of the night here. The other giant total game is 228. Houston fair by 4.5. We're obviously still dealing with Harden now. He's due back fairly soon. Could be by the end of the week. Chris Paul, obviously, we've started to see the upside. Dropped that big 37 point game against Portland. Played well against Phoenix. Obviously, that game was a little bit out of control towards the end. He's the guy that I think I'm taking over, Curry and Westbrook if I'm picking a top tier guy.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I think you buried the lead on this one. Revenge game.
Well, yeah, I mean,
in LA. Obviously, Paul did not play the last time these teams faced off. It's kind of interesting. If Patrick Beverley was playing, you could almost fill out an entire lineup of just people from the Chris Paul trade. Like, you would have Beverly, you would have Chris Paul, Sam Decker, Montrezl Harrell, and then you could toss in Mbah Moute, and you could have almost an entire revenge game lineup from this game.
Well, then you got Lou Williams. I mean, it wasn't part of the trade, but
yeah, there's Lou Williams too, which, by the way, like, there is some hatred at Lou Williams' heart for the Houston Rockets. So that is a little bit interesting to consider as well.
I mean, dropped 32 real points last time these two played. We'll talk about Williams here, but we'll finish up with Houston. Chris Paul, obviously, fantastic spot. You mentioned the narrative here, but I mean, all around, great spot for him to go out. I just think he has one of the safer floors and comes at a little bit, obviously, of a discount from Russell Westbrook. So I think I'm kind of just getting him into my lineups here tonight.
Yeah, he's pretty much the guy. He's my point guard that I'm building around. Obviously, given the matchup, excellent spot for him. Usage, he has once again eclipsed Eric Gordon for the usage lead on this team without James Harden, up to 33%. Just insane production to consider from him in a solid matchup. So I would not fade him in this spot. I wrote up Eric Gordon as a GPP target. He's been really volatile since moving back into the starting lineup. 31% usage rate without James Harden on the floor. It's kind of interesting to note the Clippers yesterday when I pulled the numbers, 30th in fantasy points allowed to shooting guards, but over the last 10 games they've been first in defensive efficiency. So one of those things has to give here. He is a volatile option to consider. I think he's an excellent GPP target, especially given his price at 7,200. He played almost 40 minutes against this team last time out, 38 fantasy points on a night without a ton of great options at the shooting guard position. I think you can lock in, a decent amount of production from him.
Yeah, I like Gordon here. I like the price tag on him. He's kind of that next tier down from like Oladipo and Lou, and I obviously think he has 40-point upside here. As far as the value options here is at the small forward spot and power forward spot. We've seen Ariza actually pop off some high ceiling games of late. He's once again just a volatile option. I mean, didn't even score in that Portland game and played 39 minutes, which blows my mind somehow. But the minutes have still been there. Like, he's still playing, over 35 minutes. At his price, I don't hate it. It's not the worst matchup in the world either.
Yeah, I don't hate it. Obviously, with Gerald Green being there and Luke Richard Mbah Moute probably coming back tonight, you would expect these rotations to shorten just a little bit, so that may eat into some of his minutes. And again, D'Antoni talked 2 weeks ago about limiting Ariza's minutes because he'd been playing him too much, and he hasn't done it yet. Like I said, with Mbop, I'm just going to call him Mbop, coming back tonight, that could change things a little bit. So I don't know that I'm really on him. I think I'd rather use like Gerald Green or someone like that who has shown the ability to just come out and shoot the lights out and rack up a ton of fantasy points pretty quickly.
Yeah, Gerald Green, I mean, he's kind of guy that I'm looking to lock in, especially on FanDuel at 4,600 at a small forward position. That's, obviously kind of it more towards the top. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think Green's very much in play. The 3-point attempts have always been through the roof. Clint Capella here, I like him a lot actually here tonight. I think it's a good spot. Obviously, we've seen DeAndre Jordan, whether he's in or out, like I'm still going to be firing away with Capella.
Yeah, I think I like him a little bit more if DeAndre is playing, because you would expect the minutes to be a little bit higher. But it is interesting to note he's been over 30 minutes in 2 of the last 3 games, so that's kind of encouraging to see. Again, I think I like him a little more if DeAndre plays, because Houston could go small to match up with Willie Reed and Montrezl Harrell, who will be the big men that are on the floor whenever without DeAndre Jordan.
I took the week or the weekend off. Did Blake play at the 5 at all?
I don't think so. I didn't actually watch that game. I could pull up the rotations and see. I think it was pretty much dominated by Willie Reed and Montrezl Harrell, because looking at their game logs from the Kings game, see 22 minutes, 27 minutes for Harrell in those 2 Kings outings, and 26 and 10 for Willie Reed. So I do think that Blake Griffin probably did spend a smidge of time at the 5.
I mean, anyone else you want to talk about here for Houston before we dive into LA? Ryan Anderson at all?
No.
You didn't bring him up in the GPP article?
I did not. It is an away game, so there is that working for him. But price up to 4,600. Obviously, we're talking about minutes probably going to go back down with Luke Richard being back. I don't see him playing the 35 or 40 minutes that he's played over the last 2 games.
Yeah. Let's talk about LA here. Kind of a lot to break down. If Jordan sits tonight, you can kind of see some of these guys becoming a little bit chalky, which I don't completely love here. Like, I'm willing to fade.
Yeah, I think if DeAndre sits, I'm still interested in Montrezl Harrell and Willie Reed. Both these guys have flashed just insane upside when given extended run. I think I'd probably go with Willie Reed over Montrezl Harrell, although you do have, of course, the revenge narrative for Montrezl Harrell. So there is that, but I think I do prefer Willie Reed in the spots. Last game against the Kings, what did he play? 26 minutes, had 42 fantasy points out of 14 and 14 point, 13 rebound, double. That's insane production at his price. He's still only 4,300. So I do have some interest in him and Harrell in cash games. Probably just Reed if I was going with GPPs.
Harold 5,400 on FanDuel, like that's a little bit of an uncomfortable price, but I think because it's just a 4-game slate and there's really no one lower, like I'll just kind of eat that price tag and use him a little bit here.
I will say this. I think one of the interesting things to note is if DeAndre does sit, Harrell, one of the best role men in the NBA, it was what he was really good at in Houston. He's been really good at it in LA as well. And the Rockets do struggle to defend the roll man and the pick and roll. So it is a spot where he could attack tonight. So ownership would probably be a little too high, again, for me to consider it in GPPs. But in cash games, I think he can go there.
Blake Griffin, I really like that FanDuel price. Like 8,600 is not that bad. Obviously, Houston has been a team that, has been decent against power forwards. But the last 10 games, 21st in defensive efficiency. Obviously, Griffin's a guy that, has shown some upside. Finally saw it against Sacramento. Didn't play well against Sacramento last time out, but I don't mind him here. Contributes across all categories. I would like to see defensive stats come up a little bit more, but it's kind of never really been his thing. At 86, I don't mind it here.
I think he's usable in all formats, especially if DeAndre sits. It's only a 27-minute sample size this season, but 1.24 fantasy points per minute without DeAndre Jordan. And the rest of the injured Clippers off the floor, that list is way too long to even rattle off at this point. But going to match up for at least a few minutes with Ryan Anderson, which Blake Griffin on Ryan Anderson is like a dream matchup. I do kind of like him in GPPs if DeAndre sits. I do have a little interest in him still, even if DeAndre plays. I think it's an excellent matchup. I don't necessarily see Houston blowing them out here, given they're without James Harden, unless Chris Paul just goes absolutely, bananas. So I think it's a spot where you can use him in pretty much both formats.
I mean, DK 9100 is a little bit different for you. For me, it's a little bit different. It's kind of site dependent. Like Green is just such a huge discount from Blake, whereas FanDuel, they're both kind of in that same price range.
I mean, not really. It doesn't really change that much for me. Like, I think given the way the slate could possibly break down, I don't necessarily think it matters that much, especially if we get some decent value opening up.
Let's talk Lou Williams. I mean, you mentioned this game, obviously potentially staying close. I agree. I think it does stay close. And it's basically because it's going to come down to their two huge offensive players, and obviously Lou Williams, who's just been a beast of late. I mean, he's a guy like once again, I kind of have trouble fading here because he's the usage, the potential here to go off for 50 plus fantasy points. Like I know his price is up quite a bit, but he's earned it.
Yeah, he really has. It's kind of sticker shock whenever you look at the price on both sites. I mean, over 9K on FanDuel, he's 8,900 on DraftKings, but like the dude has been just absolutely insane. Put up 32 points against his team last time out. Again, hatred in his heart for the Houston Rockets. I really have a tough time fading him. It is a little concerning. Like the assist numbers have been they've fluctuated a lot over the last 10 games. I mean, he does have one game where he put up 10 assists. You're counting on him putting up just a ton of raw scoring, which is a little concerning, but it's a matchup you would expect him to be able to exploit. So I do think you can use him. It's again sticker shock when you look at that price, but I would not be afraid to lock him in.
You do anything with the guards here for the Clippers?
No, I think Tyrone Wallace is kind of a little bit interesting given his price, but no, I'm not really into the Milos and Juwan Evans timeshare situation.
Yeah, I think Wallace would be the only guy that I'd take a shot on, over 30 minutes and 4 of the 5 games this year. Obviously, the big game against Golden State. I don't mind him. He probably, like you said, he's the only guy that I would consider. And 4,200 shooting guard on FanDuel is not bad.
Yeah, and he's multi-position eligible on DraftKings, shooting guard, small forward, so that does help things a little bit. Yeah, I mean he's fine. I've been on the Tyrone Wallace since he came up train. I'm eventually going to hop off. I think now might be the time that I do it. And as far as at least GPPs goes, but in cash games, he's still viable.
We haven't talked since Ryan Anderson threw down that monstrous dunk, so I think we do need to show a little respect. We crap all over him sometimes, but that was a monster dunk he had.
I did not think he had it in him. I was a little bit shocked to see him do that. Yeah, if you get posterized by Ryan Anderson, you should probably just retire.
I think so. I think that's a good clause in the NBA contracts. That's what should happen. Let's go highest score of the non-double-digit guys and non-Durant, since he's close enough.
Draymond.
All right. Give me Lou Williams. So that's it. Hope you guys have a good and safe Martin Luther King Day. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Good luck.